All right, today we are going to talk about the quadrant that an angle terminates. So the quadrant that an angle terminates determines the sign, meaning this kind of sign, meaning positive or negative value for a trig function or a trig ratio. Okay, so if we draw, let's say 120 degrees, 120 degrees would be about here-ish. Okay, it would be this angle right here. This angle we consider to be in quadrant 2. So wherever the terminating side is, that's where the angle terminates. That's the quadrant that it's in. That's generally what we say. So each of these sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent have a different value. So for example, if I plug in sine of 120, now when you do this, you do have to make sure you go to mode, and the third option down, third line down, you have to change 2 degrees. Okay, you do have to make sure here, whenever you're using sine, cosine, and tangent, you do have to make sure you're in the right mode for radians or degrees. All right, so sine of 120 degrees, if you plug that in, that's positive 0.866025, whatever, correct? Cosine is negative 0.5, and tangent is negative 1.732, whatever. It's some irrational number, okay? So those three angles, those three trig ratios for each of these sine, cosine, and tangent, 120 degrees, for sine is positive, for cosine is negative, and for tangent is negative. And that means that whatever angle we are, if we end in quadrant 2, sine is always going to be positive, and cosine is always going to be, sorry about that, and cosine and tangent are going to be negative. Now that also means that their reciprocal functions will also have the same sign, because when we do something that's reciprocal, we flip it, or we do 1 over the sine of 120. So if we're going to figure out what this value is, we do 1 over the sine of 120, which is 1.1547, blah, blah. And as you can see, this is positive. So at this moment, we don't really care about the actual value. What we care about is the sign. That's what we're focusing on today. We'll do the actual value at a later time. The secant of 120, that's 1 over the cosine of 120. So it's the reciprocal function, so that's just negative 2. And again, that's negative. And then cotangent of 120, negative 0.57735, which was 1 over the tangent of 120. That's how you plug it in. You do 1 divided by the sine of 120, or you do the alpha y equals. So again, if one angle has a positive value, so sine of 120 is positive in quadrant 2, all angles in quadrant 2 will be positive for sine and negative for the other ones. Okay, so then you can figure that out for all other trig ratios. We could do that for just pick a value, negative, or you could do the sine of, 225 or something like that, and see what is positive in quadrant 3. Okay, but I don't need to do that because we already know what it is, and I can tell you what it is. Okay, so let me just push this a little. There we go. So this is the little display. I don't know how that just happened. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't understand why it does that. Anyway, the life I lead. All right, for this one, this is the 4 quadrants. So this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 3, this is quadrant 4. The letter that's here corresponds to the OG trig functions. That means sine, cosine, and tangent. That's their first letter. So this is A, which stands for all. So all of them are positive. What's positive? These guys are positive. So what one starts with S? Well, that's sine. So sine is always positive in quadrant 2, so it does remember that the cosecant is also positive. So the reciprocal functions are always the same sign as the original. T is tangent, so that means cotangent also. And C is cosine, which means secant also. So this is all students take calculus, is our little mnemonic that goes in the order of a C. So all students take calculus. That's the counterclockwise way that we do it. All right, so which quadrant is cosine of an angle positive? So all of them are positive in quadrant 1, and cosine is positive in quadrant 4. So I would say 1 and 4. Since cosine is positive, so is its reciprocal, secant. So just to make sure you understand how this all works, we're going to really go into it and do a lot of like examples tomorrow. So which quadrant or quadrants is the tangent of an angle positive? So since tangent is positive in quadrant 3, we know that here tangent is positive, but all of them are positive in quadrant 1. So now we know that 1 and 3 is where tangent is positive. And since tangent is positive, so is its reciprocal, cotangent. I'll write the whole thing out. All right, so the basic thing that you have to understand, we'll go into more why as we go, but you need to understand that what trig functions are positive in each of the quadrants. Alrighty, wonderful. Have a wonderful day.